Hello and welcome to another instalment of the UK Column Live. It is Thursday, September the 6th, and the sun is still shining, and we're here today with a slightly different format. What we're going to be doing from now on is we'll have a guest in and we will interview the guest, and then afterwards the guest will have a chance to have comments on the news, which will give us an extra bit of feedback. Today we'll be covering organic food, new EU policy on bond markets, London Met strike, planning rules, joblessness, Osborne's booze, and Tesco's Christmas, or White Christmas, so to speak.
Tesco Special Christmas.
Tesco Special Christmas, yes. Brian, how are you?
Oh, I'm extremely well, and we've got Mr. Tim Rogers from Rwdry in South Wales, who's going to join us. Tim has got an amazing story to tell about his investigations into what's been happening in his rural community and how that leads through to big society and the work of international subversive Saul Alinsky. I think you're going to find this an extremely interesting discussion. Okay, Tim, so just tell us a little bit about how you started to see things in Rwdry. I know part of that was seeing a poster that appeared on the village hall.
Yes, well, if I can just tell you the outline of it, Brian. I've been under pressure, being scrutinised by a small number of people for a period of 13 years. So last June, when they started to direct their attention to me again, I thought, hang on, let's have a look into these people and what they're trained in. So I started watching their activities from last June. And they put up a picture for a play with the Welsh National Theatre. They put up a poster by the Rwdry Parish Hall outside of it, and they also put a poster up in the village. Now, there was differences with these posters. One of them had a fly on the forehead has been superimposed on there.
Okay, we just call that poster up so that viewers can see it. It should be coming up on the screen. There we go. We've got the picture of the boy with his face rubbed out, standing in front of a church. So carry on with your description there.
Right, okay, so one of the posters had a fly on the forehead of the boy, the picture you're showing now, and one of them didn't. And the one outside the parish hall had a fly on the head being superimposed on there. So this had obviously been done very specifically for a reason. Now, this process is called nudging. The UK.gov has got a nudging unit. And if I give an example of it, they've done a trial for 12 months on pubs and clubs, and they put a plastic fly in the urinal. So instead of people, when they're drunk, urinating on the floor, they concentrated urinating on the fly, and it saved the pubs and so on 70% of their costs for cleaning for a year.
Yeah.
So that was done specifically for people to concentrate on that picture of the boy with a scribbled out face. Now, if you look in his hand, he had a chalk or a blade or something. But in any event, looking at that picture, you'll see that it's undeniably a picture of self-harming.
Yes, yeah. This is the key thing, that people can look at it initially and they think that somebody has actually graffitied out the face, but in fact that is part of the poster itself. And
yes.
The boy in his right hand is holding what could be a blade or a piece of chalk. Yeah,
that's right.
So you picked up on both the subject matter in the poster and what you got a sense that something was happening. You started a research. Where did that take you?
Well, I started looking at the individuals who organised that play, and I soon found out that they ran a company called No Fit State Circus in Bridgend between 2002 and 2009. Now, that organisation, together with the National Theatre, were organising suicide plays for children. Hanging, jumping, and all that sort of stuff. So all of a sudden they turn up at my parish hall, and they start exactly the same. Now, when I try to alert people to the dangers of these types of suicide plays and suicide depictions, they used skills which relies on a group environment to get everybody round to all of a sudden they put a harassment warning on me. So I'm afraid I can't mention the names on this programme because of that issue, which I haven't got a problem with, actually. Yeah, so as soon as I started to try and alert people to what they were doing and how dangerous these practices were, they organised a harassment warning on me.
Right. So that would seem to indicate just straight off that what you were beginning to look at was causing other people concern. They were worried that you were putting them under the spotlight a bit.
Oh, absolutely. I'd identified them. I looked into their backgrounds. They're associated with Claude Duffield Foundation, with the Roundtree Foundation, and with UN Limited. Now, UN Limited particularly have trained over 10,000 people in the UK through the charity sector to use a specific community organising skill called Solinsky Rules for Radicals.
Yep.
So they're trained in these techniques, and this is what they're using to bring a group environment together and to target that group against an individual. And the way it works, I've been on the receiving end of this for 13 years. I didn't understand it until a year ago. And the last thing you want to do is respond to these techniques, because this is exactly what they want. So the agitator within the group will work in the background to agitate the target. The target will naturally respond as human nature. And in front of that group, they will then be empowered when they use processes like ASBOs and harassment warnings and so on to deal with that individual. So all of a sudden they appear to be the hero of the group. So it gives them the consensus to lead. So the government have put these people into every community centre and to control our communities through the localism bill and so on. And the way they get into the position to lead is to become the hero of the group. And this is why these practices are being used. Now, initially, the man who was the original Alinsky agitator, they call them disruptors, illuminators, and all sorts of different other names like community change facilitators. The original man was a man called Roger Hall. He moved into the village, I think, about 20 years ago. And secretly in the background, he was agitating. So I've done a bit of research into that man. He's changed his name. He's given himself a middle name. I don't know if most people would be aware that if you change your name in any way, it hides your previous history. He's originally from Islington in London, and he was trained in the Westminster College of Social Sciences with Alinsky agitation skills. So this man, one person can cause such disruption in a community. It's incredible.
Right. Okay. So Tim, I'm just going to try and focus things here for viewers and listeners. I think what I'd like to do is just step back a little bit to the subject, to the type of material that you saw being pushed out via the National Theatre and No Fit State Circus and similar organisations, because we've got plays on very, very dark subjects, including suicide, which are being pushed forward, particularly for young people, and in many instances, actually young school children. Now, I know some of our viewers watching this will know that we have covered some of these issues previously, but what we're going to attempt to do in our programme today is to draw this together much tighter and ultimately start to really explain what is being done under our noses. So I've got another image here, which or a couple actually, which we'll just call up on screen. The first one I know that you know very well is it's a screenshot of an organisation called First Light. They are funded by the National Lottery, as viewers will see at the top of the screen. They've got the National Lottery funding logo. And First Light boasts, amongst other things, that it helps children make films. And the one we've got on screen with the cartoon dog is a film about a dog that tries to commit suicide, tries a number of different means, including hanging. Ultimately, he runs out under a lorry, so the end of the film is pretty nasty. But the key bit is that this film was made by youngsters that the organisation is quite happy to say were over 13. So we're not actually dealing here with mature students at university, but we've got an organisation that is taking lottery money and it's producing videos about suicide, and those videos are being made by young teenagers, young school children. And I'll just, as I say, move through a few of these so that viewers and listeners are in no doubt that what we're saying is absolutely real. The next one is another First Light production, and this is talking about them running a workshop in Birmingham. And the text here says, First Fright Halloween Workshop, Birmingham. This October half-term, First Light ran a horror-filled 3-day workshop for 11 to 14-year-olds to make their very own horror film. And I can assure people that if you actually go and look at some of this material, the fact that you have got fairly unpleasant short films being made by children has got a particular sort of horror to it itself. But the key thing is that here we're talking reality, we're talking real organisations that are boasting of what they're doing with children and their minds, of course. Now this one is one that you kindly provided to us recently, so I've got on screen now a clip of the brochure from the Tron Theatre. And in that brochure for the autumn season, it's actually talking about a film, Harold and Maude. And what can you tell us about that film?
Well, that's been organised with the theatre. Now, I did find that I'd done a search, Claude Duffield Foundation, suicide, and immediately I found this film theatre production you're referring to. Now, I also found another one that was used together in Bridgend with that film is called Wrist Cutters. That was used in Bridgend from about 2005 on. So, it's very upsetting, Brian, to think that vulnerable children are being exposed to this type of material. And if you, particularly with that theatre production, if anybody watched it, they think to themselves, my God, this is terrible, right? You certainly wouldn't want to be exposing children to it. And this appears to be the case.
Yeah, and this we're not just seeing this as one or two isolated incidents, are we? I mean, your research and our research is showing that what we're seeing is these very dark, depressing, depraved, and including the subject of suicide, these theatre groups are now operating right the way across the country. It's not just in Wales with the Welsh Theatre. We know that similar groups are now operating in Cornwall and England and north of the border in Scotland. So you're seeing them operate effectively in networks, is that correct?
Yes, that's right. It's common purpose graduates organising it all. And I have come across hundreds of theatre productions regarding suicide. Now, most people wouldn't be aware of this, but the National Theatre was banned in Great Britain in 1918 and also 1954 for doing exactly the same thing, which is incredible. So, all of a sudden we're having this unleashed throughout our society, throughout the arts and drama networks, to children. And whenever you put in the search engine theatre suicide, National Theatre suicide, it's all over the internet. It's not hard to find this information. So I think the only missing part of the link is with the Bridgend suicide clusters. Were these children exposed excessively to this type of material, glorifying self-harming, glorifying suicide?
Well, my own, I have to say, Tim, that my own research into this has clearly shown that children in the Bridgend and South Wales area have been thoroughly exposed to this type of material. And of course, the other thing that we have been pointing out in the talks, well, the talks that I've been doing, but also the UK column has been printing and warning people, is that we're not just seeing this very dark theatrical material, we're also seeing it presented in ways which is clearly including the use of applied behavioural psychology and NLP.
Yes.
So the very dark, disturbing messages which are coming across in these plays, and creative drama, creative artwork is the sort of general blanket term that's being used. But of course, it isn't just a question of acting or a film. The images and scenes are being put across with applied behavioural psychology and NLP. And this, of course, means that in many instances the message that's being portrayed in the film is going straight into the subconscious minds of young children and young teenagers. I'll come back to you. I just want to follow on from this Harold and Maude brochure by showing a still of the actual film itself, which is disturbing because it is showing an early opening scene for the film where this young boy is coming up with different methods of suicide in order to shock his family. But here we have the subject of hanging in particular being pushed in front of people and young audiences. And of course, one of the very, very worrying features of the suicides that are happening in South Wales and in other parts of the country is that hanging is becoming the preferred method, which does not fit the normal statistical distribution. I know this is a very, very heavy subject for some people, but we are talking about young children in some instances and young adults who are ending their lives. And at the moment, there is no comprehensive investigation by authorities into the causes of this. And what's more interesting is that when we and other people have flagged up the dangers of this type of creative arts, not only are we getting the brush off, we're finding that doors are being slammed shut in our face, which brings us back really to the fact that when you, Tim, have started to pick up on that Rudery brochure, obviously you were not making friends in your local area. Yeah. So how have you gone on to try and research and discover more about what's happening?
Well, I'm prompted to research every time these people start to focus their attention against me and my private interests, being my property. So, every time they direct attention against me, I won't respond, Brian, because I know exactly what type of skills they're using. I just research further into their activities, where they've been, who are they, how they're operating. And I tell you what I found unbelievable the other day is a police inspector called Gareth Linton from Bedworth Police Station is an ILM 7, Minst, M-I-N-S-T, ILM 7. He's a common purpose graduate. Now, there's also several other common purpose graduates operating from Caerphilly Council. And I believe, it's my belief, that they operate in a private sense out of the lawful jurisdiction, our British Constitution, and they're directing their efforts towards individuals who get in the way.
Right. So we've got a number of things happening here. You're describing that we've got theatrical organisations working on the minds of young people. By running these plays, putting on films. We know this is happening. We are talking about the use of applied psychology to exacerbate the effects that can be produced in these programs. And then you're also describing the fact that the material itself is actually being spread by a network of individuals, and that when you've been digging into those networks, you're finding a common thread of common purpose trained people as well.
Yes, but they're very, very crafty. These people are highly organised. So it's very difficult to identify them as common purpose graduates. They're encouraged to open up lots of different charities. They're trained under lots of different names. But every single time you come across one of these people, that's all you've got to do is find out what courses they've been on and put that together with that name of that organisation together with common purpose in the search engine. And you will find that more than likely in every occasion that I've come across, if they've attended leadership programs, they're common purpose graduates.
Right. Now, I have, as you know, given a lot of talks on the subject of common purpose, and one of the things that I've been very careful to put across is the fact that somebody's done a common purpose course does not automatically mean that they're up to no good.
No, that's right.
But we can also say that in many, many cases where we see strange things happening, fraud and corruption being one of them, that if we start to dig into the backgrounds of the people who are helping to propagate this, we come up with common purpose names. And a story about fraud and corruption, well, it's fact about fraud and corruption, is emerging as we speak in Sheffield, where of course it is now well known and proven that many of the key players involved in that were concerned with common purpose. But we're definitely not saying that anybody who's been connected with common purpose is involved in this very nasty stuff. What I think you're saying is that the people, when you're digging into it, you are very often finding a common connection with common purpose. Would that be fair?
Well, absolutely. Now, I'm starting to get the distinct impression that, I know these people are groomed over a period of years, if not decades. And when they get to certain levels, I think as maybe, MI5 or something, they get to certain levels, they're allowed to do different operations. And I think this is what we're seeing. So, it's crucial to point out that, we are not the police, we are not the judge and juror. That's all we're doing is merely pointing out what we're seeing and what we're putting together. So you're absolutely right. Not all common purpose graduates are barred. Of course they're not. But these people are groomed over a period of years, and they use behavior modification therapy on them in the form of neurolinguistic programming and cognitive brain therapy.
Yeah. All right, now I'm just going to absolutely reinforce it for people that what we're talking about is real. I've got another picture which I'd just like to bring up on screen. And this is one of the organisations that you alerted us to, which is flyingeffects.co. And this is an organisation which is teaching people, including young people involved in the theatre, correct me if I'm wrong, but teaching them how to produce realistic hanging scenes on stage.
Well, that was particularly, that was a particularly disturbing one. I found that very offensive, Brian. And this high fly was used with No Fit State Circus and in conjunction with the Welsh National Theatre during the time of the suicides, just prior, during and after in Bridgend.
Right. Okay, so you're taking this very deep this time, which is excellent, Tim, because we're now saying that not only can we identify these organisations, but we can actually start to home in on the exact times, dates that they began to appear in South Wales, and it was at the same period that we suddenly started to get these suicide clusters starting.
Yes, that appears to be the case.
Yeah.
And I think the figures as well, I think it's very important to mention that the media no longer reports on the suicides. I mean, we know we've counted 79, and it's, it's still ongoing. But the media don't report on the suicides anymore because it actually causes suicide to report. And if you have a look at the studies and the psychology behind it, there's plenty of evidence that can be found. Psychological world reports that when they actually report on suicide, it increases suicide.
And this is particularly true when the reports are made in a sensationalist way in the newspapers. So there are pictures of the victims, there's detail as to how the victims committed suicide. it's these pictures which have been promoted by the mainstream press, which young people can relate to. Am I correct?
Yes,
that's
well,
what's caused the problem.
It's all about identifying with their mentor, and romanticism plays a large part in it. Because if somebody sees, say for argument's sake, I come across a film about two homosexuals who fell in love. This was put up at the theatre, and the one partner of the man was bullied right way throughout his life, and at the end of the scene, he was at such despair that he killed himself. He hung himself. Now this was put out in Wales again, this type of material, and that is the most dangerous type of play you could possibly put out, because you're mixing her up to identify with somebody's feelings and identify with the loss, and then of course at the end of it to identify with the fact that he couldn't see any way out, so he killed himself.
Yeah.
This is unbelievably dangerous, Brian. So if I were to read the worldwide studies on exactly what causes contagion suicide, and then you look at their plays and the material they're putting out to vulnerable children, and it absolutely fits the criteria perfectly to create a contagion effect.
Yeah, copycat.
Copycat suicides, the Werther effect.
The Werther effect, yeah. I bring up a comment here. Well, it's actually part of a document which came out of Leeds. I've shown this at talks before, but I thought it would be particularly relevant here. This is part of a report that was put together by a teacher of 20 years' experience. I was never able to identify the person concerned. I believe it was a lady. But she had gone on a course with colleagues. Yeah, and the details are here. In September 2005, I attended a 2-day course entitled Teaching Freedom, which was devised and led by James Dakin. The sponsors of the course were Leeds Rhinos, Education Leeds, and SEAL, the Society for Effective and Affective Learning. Slight grammatical error there. The entire teaching staff of my school was present, along with teachers from other schools. The aim of the course was to teach us how to lead creative visualizations in our classes across subject areas. The techniques advocated are gaining respectability because they improve memory, supposedly improve results in academic subjects, and enthrall the whole child. I was concerned about some of the content on the course, which involved New Age type relaxation exercises, and being told in one visualization in which we were the participants to look into the eyes of the owl who will impart ancient wisdom to you. The manual states that the system is successful because it engages the whole person through non-conscious learning, brain engagement, alpha-beta stated and heart connectedness, and using relaxing as a doorway to deeper learning. Now, what the lady goes on to say in the report is that after this course, some of her colleagues were subjected to very dark and disturbing images in their mind, which they couldn't actually get rid of. And her point in producing the document was to ask really a key question, and that was that if this material was capable of producing these disturbing images in the minds of an adult, what were they going to do in the minds of young children? And I
think most of us can relate to this because if you watch a sort of very dark horror film, immediately after the film, you can have these harrowing images in your mind because you're relaxed in the cinema, you're watching what's going on, and you can really sort of get into this stuff. So what you're describing is fairly disturbing. But there's no doubt that these art suicide drama material is being used in entirely a political sense.
Right. Well, we're just about to come on to that. Excellent, good timing with that remark. If I just have one closing comment on this document. When this was sent through to me, which was several years ago, I did take the trouble to follow it up. I can absolutely confirm the course did take place. I can confirm that the gentleman who ran the course had a combined degree in psychology and geology. I can confirm that at the time he did some of the training events, there were people from Switzerland present. I never did discover who those people were. And I was also able to obtain a copy of the contract for this training. And at the time the training was carried out, there was no signature on the contract with Leeds. So effectively, as far as I know, that would mean that their insurances were not in place. But we never did discover who had actually set up this training and why this type of applied psychology was being trialled on young children. And a point that I've made in talks before is that, as with all hypnosis, and this is a form of hypnosis, there are risks. And even if we were dealing at 1/10 of 1%, if we're starting to give this training to hundreds of thousands of school children, we can expect to see a significant number, hundreds if not thousands of school children, showing disturbing or adverse effects to the applied psychology. So,
Brian,
yeah.
Everybody must be thinking to themselves, well, why are they doing this? Why are they ramming out suicide players? What's the need of it all? And very interestingly, I come across a document a few days ago, the Welsh Intelligence Agency. And there's eco-groups they're keeping an eye on, because these eco-groups, who were many common purpose graduates follow this line of politics. They advocate the murder of 80% of the British population. Now that's on the Welsh Intelligence Agency site, and anybody can go on there. And particularly there's one group that the intelligence services are watching, and it's called Earth First. Now again, Earth First is funded by a man called George Soros. George Soros is behind all the networks in the UK. He funds it all. So it depends how far you want to research this. But right up the top of the shit pile, if I can say that, because that's the way I see it, is George Soros, the same man who, over the last 2 years, has single-handedly changed the euthanasia laws right the way around Western nations. He calls himself a philanthropist, but in reality, he's a Bilderberger. He's trying to establish a world government, and he's deeply embedded into the United Nations and the European Union.
Yeah. I'm going to say very gently, we like to keep UK column clean, so we'll leave that word, but in general, we'll stay away from anything too strong. This is extremely interesting, Tim, because if we come on to the subject of how do these things happen, whether it's how we're training children in school, how we're running the courses, who's providing the funding for non-government organisations, many of the trusts, many of the think tanks. Once we start to delve into this subject of where is this type of material coming from, we find organisation after organisation that claims to be a charity or a non-profit making organisation. But when you delve into the background, you come to the same old organisations that are providing funding, which could be the Nuffield Trust or the Roundtree Foundation or Claude Duffield. And most people have absolutely no idea of the huge amounts of money, vast amounts of money, which those organisations can bring to bear on socio-political subjects. And of course, if we're at the level of George Soros, we can see, I think if you visit George Soros's website and look at his funding of organisations of change, I believe that the figure of $1.9 billion is mentioned. So we don't know the exact wealth of this man, but what is quite easy to track is the fact that his money, as you correctly state, is actually coming through these organisations and is funding what we are now starting to pick and pull apart as very dark, dirty stuff, which is being put very close to young people and our children.
Well, George Soros, Brian, by all accounts, has said quite openly in the political scene, you'll find him all over the web, the man's a monster. And last month, President Putin put an international arrest warrant on him, and they banned non-government organizations. You'll also see it called NGOs. They banned NGOs from Russia. And the arts nonsense going back about a month ago with the... what do they call them, the Pussycat Girls or something? Well, they were trying to create friction. It's all Saul Alinsky type of stuff. And, I mean, it was incredible how it went right away through their media. And as a result of it, these young ladies had a few years in prison for defamation of faith and so on. So, you know, Russia has recognized what a dangerous man George Soros is. But on the other side of, or into Europe, he's funding all these arts plays. He's funding all these Saul Alinsky techniques. He's funding Common Purpose. And he's also deeply embedded into the US, America. Everything that's happening in this country is going on in the United States.
Right, okay. Now, I think what we do, because we've got a very, very big subject here altogether, and I think what we'd like to do today for the audience is put over enough factual material so that people can go away and check on what we're talking about and look at the detail. So we've mentioned George Soros. I think that's appropriate because we could do a whole program on George Soros and his socio-political economic activities. But if we bring it in a little bit for today, the man that you've repeatedly mentioned, of course, is Saul Alinsky himself, and we've got a photograph of him here. A subversive, there is no other word for it. This man was highly active in America in the late 60s and 70s through into the very early 80s. And his remit on a Marxist ideology, communitarian, if you want to be more precise, but I'm going to label it as Marxist, as that's the closest label. What this man was doing was planning doctrine, strategy and tactics to overturn Western democracies. And his key work was contained in 2 books, of which the major one, which we just focus on a bit, was Rules for Radicals. And I should have a picture of that book sitting on somebody's table here. So we are talking real material. I'd encourage people to get hold of a copy of this, which you can do as a second-hand copy from the internet. He dedicated his work to Lucifer, which is a very interesting thing for this man to do. So I don't think in a spiritual sense he was Christian or any other of the mainstream religions. But what was he doing? He was working out ways to actually pull society apart. Now, I've got 5 slides which actually show his key 12 rules. But before we actually bring those up on screen, would you like to give us some of your own comment on Saul Alinsky, Tim?
Well, essentially, this is what I've been on the receiving end of for the last 13 years, on and off. And I've done quite a bit of research into Saul Alinsky, where he started off, what he did with communities. And again, you know, a monster of our time. He started off in Chicago and Detroit in the 50s and 60s. His work was based on subversion, some of the work of Antonio Gramsci, gradualism to Marxism, and communism. And he spent 2 years in prison. The man got himself put in prison with Al Capone to learn the techniques to intimidate people. So Saul Alinsky's work is based basically on Al Capone intimidation and the Marxist theology.
Which is about getting in into the heart of communities.
To disrupt and destroy those communities from within. And I tell you what I find absolutely remarkable is that this worked in white neighborhoods. Particularly, he set out to destroy white neighborhoods in the 50s and 60s, and as a result, he caused civil wars. The mayor of New York put him on an injunction to stop him going into New York, because at that time there wasn't the legislative process to arrest him. So the FBI followed him wherever he went. But what I was going to say is that incredible how he wormed his way into white communities, but black communities rejected what he was doing. And I suppose this is because blacks are generally more streetwise than white communities. They're more poorly educated, or they were, should I say, in the 50s and 60s. And as a result, they perhaps learned the ways on the street, to identify people when they're trying to con them, if I can put it like that.
Yep. So from the outset, anybody, and this is so easy for us in this program, because we're saying to viewers and to listeners, we're mentioning this man's name. Please get out there and research yourselves to see what we're talking about. But the evidence is all there that this man was a dangerous subversive. He caused a huge amount of trouble in America. We could talk more about what he actually got up to in America. I'm just going to mention that one of the supposedly top American politicians who thinks that Saul Alinsky's work is wonderful is Hillary Clinton. I'll just throw that in. And also Obama has boasted of using Alinsky tactics, but probably that's a whole separate program to talk on the American side. But we are going to be showing in the following section of the program that this man's policy is now being used in UK. If I just call up the first three rules, which will pop up on screen. We've got rule 1, power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. Rule 2, never go out the expertise of your people. And rule 3, wherever possible, go outside the expertise of the enemy. Now, the word enemy is extremely interesting here, because the enemy in Saul Alinsky's mind is the established democratic government. And he was not working to achieve an election and a replacement government that was going to introduce more social policies. He was actually agitating at very low level in the communities to overturn the government. He's talking about building power from flesh and blood. He's saying never go outside the expertise of your people. It results in confusion, fear and retreat. Feeling secure adds to the backbone of anyone. Rule 3, look for ways to increase insecurity, anxiety and uncertainty. So this man is putting it in our faces that everything he's doing is heading towards stirring in increasing anxiety and uncertainty. Just come in, Tim, if you've got a particular comment. Otherwise, I'll just sort of gently work through these.
All right. Well, let me just say about Obama.
Yeah.
Obama started life off, again in Chicago, as a community organizer. So he's like a master of the subversive skills that we're talking about. Eventually making himself up to president now of the United States, completely controlled by Israel. But that's another story that we'll save for another time. But these techniques, Brian, you're talking about and we're now discussing are the most cruel, most wicked, abhorrent practices that anybody can be involved in. And I believe that anybody who openly uses these techniques, they get a form of enjoyment from it, about abusing a vulnerable victim. And there's another creature that represents this type of person as a psychopath.
Yes.
And another one is a paedophile, because paedophiles are more for the grooming of a vulnerable individual. It's not about the sex, it's about the grooming, the power and control. And again, you can read the studies on it. So the people who take pleasure in these cruel, terrible tactics, they're psychopaths. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind at all about it.
Well, I would absolutely agree with that. We'll just move on here to rule 4, make the enemy live up to its own book of rules. If the rule is that every letter gets a reply, send 30,000 letters. You can kill them with this because no one can possibly obey all their own rules. 5, ridicule is man's most potent weapon. There's no defence. It's irrational. It's infuriating. It also works as a key pressure point to force the enemy into concessions. It's crude, rude and mean. They want to create anger and fear. A good tactic is one your people enjoy. So if you've got activists and they're enjoying and being paid for their dirty work, their subversive work, then they're going to keep doing it. And I have to say, I look at our own government at the moment and I watch as people who've quite clearly got very questionable track records, if not criminal records, who are actually now in Westminster supposedly governing us.
Brian, anybody using these techniques are abnormal. If somebody, anybody can look at these techniques and see what they are. Just put in the search engine, Saul Alinsky, the full list. Have a read. There must be something wrong with anybody who could start using these techniques against vulnerable individuals. It's disgusting.
Yeah. Oh, I have said before that I found this material very interesting in the early days because it took me straight back to my initial training period in the Navy back in the very, very early 70s, where, of course, a large part of that training was looking at what was actually going on in the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc and what we are actually facing as a political ideology. And one of the things that I remember very clearly is that, of course, we were taught alongside the physical threats of missiles, guns, bombs, gas, nuclear weapons. The other part of the armament of the other side was this psychological warfare, of which, of course, subversion was a key part. If you could get into a country and actually get amongst the fabric of society, amongst the people themselves, you could start to agitate and bring down that society.
If I can just butt in there, Brian, it's very, very important, as you were just speaking about, once you, gain access to that country. Now, subversion is a two-way street. And if you don't respond, if you don't play their game, they cannot subvert. All right?
Yes.
So it's very important for people to realise that. We're talking about a two-way street. Subversion is two ways. If you don't play their game in any way whatsoever, they cannot produce any of these effects of Saul Alinsky on you.
Yes. Well, this is very important because we're definitely going to leave this programme today by mentioning what people can do, and exposure. If you've got an attack which is hidden, it's being done in the dark, it's subversive, the first thing that you've got to do is shine a light on it, because when ordinary people can see what's being done, that is at least 90% of the countermeasure. I've got three more rules. Rule 10, if you push a negative hard enough, it will push through and become a positive. So violence from the other side can win the public to your side. So what this is really saying is that if you can get demonstrations where you can entice violence by the state, you can then turn around and claim, of course, that the other side is the bully and what you're doing is perfectly normal and reasonable. Rule 11, the price of a successful attack is a constructive alternative. Never let the enemy score points because you're caught without a solution to the problem. So all of this is the language of battle, but of course we're doing it in a devious way. And it's really Rule 12, which I've blown up, and I'll read it in entirety. Pick the target, freeze it, personalise it, and polarise it. Cut off the support network and isolate the target from sympathy. Go after people and not institutions. People hurt faster than institutions. This is cruel but very effective. Discreet, personalised criticism and ridicule works. So here was a man who, without any ifs or buts, was saying go after the individuals, and if you can undermine them and ridicule them and destroy them as people, then all to the well and good, really.
Yeah, what I was going to say earlier, Brian, is what I forgot to put in. The Saul Alinsky's techniques are also mixed up with the art of war. The art of war, Antonio Gramsci, Marxism, and Al Capone. So this is what we're dealing with. So this is what our government, allegedly our government, has unleashed at ground level in our communities.
Well, I agree, and we're going to prove this is the case in this programme. But I just wanted to mention here, after putting Rule 12 up on the screen, that this to me fits in perfectly with Julia Middleton, the chief executive of the political charity Common Purpose, in her book Beyond Authority, because she actually says in there, or uses the quotes from other people to emphasise the meaning, that when there is opposition, these people should be run over, bulldozed out the way, ridiculed, brought down. So if there are viewers out there who still have not read Julia Middleton's book Beyond Authority, please don't go buy it, but you could get it from a library or borrow it from somebody. I think you will be very, very surprised at exactly how angry and aggressive the language is in that book about dealing with people who don't want to conform to the change programme that Common Purpose is putting forward. And I don't think that this apparent connection between the language in Julia Middleton's book and Alinsky is by any coincidence. Can we prove that this is tied into government policy in this country? And the answer is absolutely. I've got two very simple slides here which are quoting from mainstream press, so people can check it. This one was from The Guardian, but The Guardian was reporting in detail, very accurately, that David Miliband was proposing, June 2010, David Miliband is proposing rebuilding the Labour Party using 1,000 Labour supporters as community organisers. The Guardian article mentions Barack Obama and the White House, saying that Miliband wants to turn the Labour Party into a grassroots movement for change. And it then says the philosophy of political action theorised by American activist Saul Alinsky. So that Guardian article, and there have been many others, has been very accurate in pointing out the links between mainstream Labour policy and Saul Alinsky, and we can do exactly the same with the Conservatives. Here we've got a quote which has come straight out of the coalition government itself, which is saying, according to the coalition government sources, organisers will play an important role in delivering the big society by building community spirit. The Office of Civil Society has stated that the policy is based on the principles of Saul Alinsky. So the question really for viewers and listeners to be asking is, why is it that in a supposed right-wing Tory government we're seeing Saul Alinsky, and we're seeing it with Miliband, and we're seeing it with the Lib Dems? And of course the answer for that is that there is only a puppet show of party politics at the moment. The common purpose, the common political agenda is Alinsky. Have you seen any more connections on this between mainstream parties and the Alinsky doctrine, Tim?
Well, they're all into it, Brian. The so-called coalition, the Labour government, they're all part of the same plan. You know, it's one party. Our country is controlled by one party, and that party, if you look at it as a pyramid structure, is controlled by a group called the Bilderbergers. So they got control of our politicians, and they're all doing it for the money. Basically, they've all been bought off. Very, very worrying, these Alinsky techniques, because I said a year ago that it's my belief that Saul Alinsky practices were used to bring down Middle Eastern countries, and I forwarded you over a document the other day confirming that, a doctor of philanthropy from London, confirming that the Middle Eastern countries were brought down by the big society projects. Now, if you can just imagine all this tension being created in different communities around the country in concert, in unison, at the same time, it would enable the government to bring in the Civil Contingency Act 2004, clamp down on society, military on our streets. We're under military rule. At the moment, we're protected. We're protected by our British Constitution. There's nothing wrong with that British Constitution, only what they've done to it over the last few decades. And this is the final nail in Britain's coffin, and our Magna Carta and our Bill of Rights. It's in their way as much as the Human Rights Bill is in their way, because that's another legislation that was brought out as an agreement for 27 neighbour states to protect what communist governments always do. Murder, take people's property off them, and destroy families from within.
Well, and of course, sorry to interject there, but of course the other thing that communist and fascist governments do is that if people stand up to them and object to them, and I don't want to deal with the subject right at this moment, but we'll come on to it, but of course what they do is use the psychiatric system as a gulag of prison camps, so that if you dare to challenge the common political agenda, you must be mad, and therefore you're going to be imprisoned in a psychiatric unit. And of course, this is something we're seeing more of, and I would like to say here in the middle of this programme that, of course, we have the very brave gentleman Martin Brighton, who has been whistleblowing on millions of pounds worth of fraud in Sheffield. And at the moment, exactly the same thing is happening, that they are attempting to brand him as mentally ill. So,
well, I'm glad you brought that subject up, Brian, because as you know, on the 30th of August, I sent an email to a man called Daniel Perkins from Caerphilly Council, informing him that I'm going to go on UK Column Live today and tell people what's going on, and explain the social sciences behind the government and council policies. And on the 31st of August, unbelievably, I had a letter from a doctor's surgery that I haven't attended for 20 years. I'm with a private consultant. And they say that the social services have been in touch with them, and they want to see me as a matter of urgency regarding my mental health. So what they're trying to do is they know they don't want this information going out. I mean, you're obviously an enemy to them, Brian. They don't want this program going out. They don't want us speaking about what they're up to, because these people work behind the curtain in the dark. And as you so rightly said earlier, when you shine the spotlight on them, they're terrified. There's a damn sight more of us than them. These people represent the absolute minuscule minority in our country. But the problem is they've been put into leadership positions. It's all about leadership. So, yeah, you know, as you said about this fella called Martin who's exposing stuff, and so have I been. And then I've got absolute clear evidence that within a 24-hour period, after I informed them on going on UK Live, they start to question. They put the wheels in motion to try and have me sectioned, to stop me telling people what's going on.
Yeah, this is very, very serious stuff. Again, I think we can do another session having a look at the corruption of the psychiatric system. Apart from anything else, we're now getting psychiatrists and clinical psychologists who are passing information to us, because they are themselves very, very concerned of what they see as political control and policy being put into a profession that they regard as being obviously to help people and to cure people who are suffering from mental health problems. So we'll come back onto that. I've got a picture of a gentleman who's a favourite of mine. We need a very big screen for this, because this is Eric Pickles from the Tories. This man, of course, has been thrusting through not only big society, but the localism bill. And I've got a quote from him, which I think really sets the scene. Should come up. Eric Pickles, the local government secretary, leaves no doubt about what the real message is. He stated recently, "We're going to shake up the balance of power in this country. We're going to change the nature of the constitution. Be in no doubt about our commitment to localism. I know I look like an unlikely revolutionary, but the revolution starts here. Now here we have a supposed conservative that is absolutely pushing revolution and the drive for revolution into the faces of the general public. So there is an unbelievable arrogance in this man. I think that he thinks the average member of the public is too stupid to actually understand that what we now have in Westminster are absolute traitors to Britain and the British Constitution. And are they working on a revolution? Well, this man is absolutely saying so. And of course, the moment you see big society and the localism bill run together, and as you've said, Tim, very accurately, with the Civil Contingencies Act loitering in the background, what we are seeing is the parts of the jigsaw coming together to take us into a dictatorship. Of course, with modern technology and databases and CCTV cameras, we're not heading into East Germany, we're heading into something very much darker than that.
If you have a look at the history of communism, every single regime, I don't think there's any exceptions, Brian, were created from subversion, from practices going on under the radar of the people of the country, you know, who's on the receiving end of it. The Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik regime, which of course in English means the majority, another communist party. And, you know, I mean, you look at the history at Russia, they don't show it on the television. 60 to 110 million people were murdered throughout that regime. And it's, you know, this is the identical process. Nothing is different. Nothing has changed. It's all the same. Yep. And they're producing for us full-on absolute dictatorship and to live under tyranny, to live under the jackboot.
Right, but of course what we're seeing, if we just draw in the thread of where we started, the attack that these people are prepared to put on society in Britain, this is not just directed at people of voting age. These people will attack everybody and everything, our institutions, our culture, our history, our medical system, our police force, our security systems. And of course, they are absolutely going to go for children and young people, because if they can destroy the minds of young people, they've already started to put in position their control structure, because the young people are going to grow up into adults who can't resist. So if there's anybody at the moment listening to us who's thinking, well, what is the connection with the fact that we have got these very, very dark plays attacking the minds of our children? These people want to attack the minds of our young people, because if they can disturb young people, they will grow up into disturbed adults who are going to mean that we have this chaotic society. I'm just going to draw into two documents here which we've featured in the news this week. But Tim, these are your babies because you dug them out, and they are quite incredible. This is a House of Commons Public Administration Select Committee report, 17th session, 2010 to 12, on the big society. And I've got a couple of comments from this document. In it, a gentleman in question 30, Paul Flynn, is saying we have a Home Secretary now who does want to have revolutionary change, straight out of a government document. And if we take it on a bit, there's a conversation here going on with Danny Kruger and Paul Flynn. But if I take you to the end of the second paragraph with Danny Kruger speaking, and it says, the courage and resolution of David Cameron on this one means he's going to keep on pushing at it. And I think that Ken Clarke is going to stay on in his job for, I hope, another year or two and implement this revolution. So these gentlemen in a Westminster document are discussing the revolution, and they're also discussing the fact that Ken Clarke is clearly involved. Now, he's gone to a position of Minister without portfolio, but he is still absolutely in the decision-making body of government. And here we're being told he's going for revolution. And if I just take it on a bit, There's another comment here from Lord Glasman, question 122. This is all taken from the Westminster document, and I'll just bring you to the end, which is in bold. This is the paradox of community organising. Just to go back, you can only have a common good if there is tension, if there are degrees of conflict. So this gentleman thinks that if we're to move forward in this country, we've actually got to stimulate tension and conflict. And of course, this is what more and more people are beginning to pick up on, and really brings us to where you started from, Tim.
Well, Brian, if I can say that people maybe think to themselves now, well, how can they create such tension? How can they do it? Well, I'm watching on a daily basis. They're forming hundreds of groups, common land groups, fencing groups, scout groups, walking groups, ramblers groups. There's nothing wrong, of course, with enjoying the countryside. And if you have a look at one of the documents I sent you, it said this revolution will start from the countryside. So they're forming lots of these groups. They're empowering these people by saying to them that they can identify different problems with people's private properties. And then they put in reports into the local authority. This is being colluded, particularly with legal staff in councils. They will then start the start the agitation process against that person and their private rights. So when this process is going, is starting to snowball. Once tension starts, it can only be likened to a pendulum. It's very, very difficult to stop. And and again, what I find absolutely amazing is that some of our police, very, very, very few of them, the vast majority are decent, but some of our police, our social services, our councils, they're deeply involved with this, and they think, for some unknown reason to me, that they're immune from everything that's going to erupt. This is going to affect every single person's life in every single way you can possibly imagine. So they're forming groups, they're using those groups to abuse our laws, so all of us are absolutely fed up to the back teeth, and we'll be so angry that things will start to erupt. When you understand how this works, it's very easy to step back and look at all this happening like you're looking into a microscope, if I can put it like this, because it does really give you the sense that you're detached from what these people are doing when you understand what's going on. So please research it, understand it. It will take you a little while to get your head around things, because what we're talking about is very abnormal. But once you study it and you get into it, tell other people, show other people the documents, show other people what's going on. We don't want tension. We don't want conflict in our lives. We want to maintain our traditional values and even parts of our multicultural values in this country. But we don't want tension. That's the last thing we want.
Okay. Tim, right, I've been a little bit naughty because I should have given you a little bit of a heads up that the clock's marching on. So we've just got a few minutes to close in, and thank you very much for introducing that positive note, because I've got some things to add on that. I've got very quickly a quote here which I think encapsulated the dialogue over this business of big society and Alinsky and what big society is. But I'll just read through some of this for the listeners. As well as being Maoist, there are weird streaks of anarchism and even Leninism, all power to the parishes, about the notion of big society. Big society is organised chaos. In an article in the Telegraph, 28th of December 2010, Michael Gove compared the government's approach to big society to Maoism. He appeared to be alluding to the government's ceaseless push for revolutionary change. He hit the nail on the head rather better than he realised. The big society is indeed a revolutionary movement launched from the countryside. That's exactly what you've just said. Nostalgia isn't what it used to be. As well as being Maoist, there are weird streaks of anarchism and even Leninism about the big society. Sorry, there's a repeat there. Both Red Toryism and its more recent and equally incoherent mirror image. Both Red Toryism and its more recent equally incoherent mirror image. I've taken these statements as they were made, so if there's a little bit of blurring, it was in the original text. Without such strategic intervention, a very different and even more dangerous atomization would break out between different neighbourhoods or localities, setting those with fewer resources in direct competition with each other as well as the richer ones. In this sense, Blond's approach is akin to a kind of communitarian anarchism. That was a word we mentioned earlier in the show. The big society actually represents an atomization of our society and could easily descend further into an anomic and chaotic locality-based version of the devil take the hindmost. And that's come from Chartist organisation, but really it brings out all of the key parts of the process.
Brian, can I just explain to the viewers exactly what they're talking about, the keywords? I mean, I think all of us understand what anarchy is. All of us know what anarchy is, chaos. We all know what chaos is. Hindmost means that desperation, every man for himself. Moist, Mao, done exactly the same in China. It erupted into civil wars right the way across the country because he was trying to install a communist dictatorship. And they eventually caught up with Mao and his wife, and they murdered them. Now, Leninism is subversion techniques. When they want to be a nationalist, they'll be a nationalist. When they want to be a Labour candidate, they'll be a Labour candidate, and so on. Leninism was all about subversion, getting yourself into the correct position to subvert. All right. So those are the key words we're talking about.
Okay, and we are now seeing those words and that language not just in some of the extreme left old Labour. We're seeing this driven right the way through the mainstream party politics. Okay, just one final comment. What do you think we should do about this? What are we going to do to stop this blatant subversion of our society?
Well, actually, Brian, good point. I was just going to ask you. The easiest way to deal with this is to let your friends know. You must take this as a very serious message from UK Column. They are engineering civil disruption. There is absolutely no doubt about it, and every single one of you will suffer from this process they're engineering. So do your studying, tell your friends, show them the documents. We don't want tension in our communities. We want to live in peace and be left alone. So I would urge everybody to educate people and tell people what's going on and stop these groups forming because these groups are being used as Alinsky-type groups. That was actually a quote from the Third Sector publication that I found for Wales. They're forming Alinsky-style groups from discrete organisations. One of those discrete organisations, of course, I live next door to, Rudbury Parish Hall, and I'm watching on a daily basis, and I'm seeing it unfold. I'm speaking to other friends of mine in the valleys who are under the same sort of tension and conflict that they're directing against me. Don't respond. Educate yourself. Educate your friends. Educate your local police officers. Let's put a stop to this. It's not difficult. The last thing we want is violence and conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very, very much for that. And that has been an absolutely tremendous report from you, Tim. So thanks very much. I'll simply add, stick together. It doesn't matter what colour people are. It doesn't matter what background you're from. It doesn't matter what religion you've got or none. The people who are doing this to us will have us all in the camps unless we actually stick together and probably start to love one another. So excellent point, Brian. We're all human beings. It doesn't matter if you're Catholic or Christian or Hindu or Muslim. It doesn't matter what colour you are. We're all human beings. None of us want this. None of us do. No, and we can stop it. Okay, Tim, thank you very much for joining us. That was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Well, welcome back to UK Column Live, and I'm sure you will agree with me that was an absolutely amazing talk through what's happening both locally in South Wales and a lead through politics as to what's really happening via the cabal that's in power in Westminster. Now, something I'd just like to reiterate is that even though we've had over an hour's programme on what's happening, we just cannot get out all of the evidence that we hold. And we'd just like to encourage viewers and listeners to get out there and research yourselves. We're pointing you in the right direction. We're giving you facts and figures and information, but it's up to you to really go out there, research, check it for yourselves. Don't believe us. Have a look at what we're talking about, but check it for yourselves, because that is the way that you'll have confidence what we're saying is in fact true. Now, I know Mike's in the background. Would just like a couple of words on a couple of points that Tim Rogers has raised. Mike.
Brian, well, the thing that struck me during that interview was that a lot of documents and a lot of information coming out on, and they're telling us what they're doing, and it's very easy to think to yourself, well, if they're telling us what they're doing, it can't be as the UK column is presenting it. And basically, I'm feeling very motivated about this whole idea of consent and the principle of consent. And the fact is that consent is presumed while we remain silent. Now, people in the sort of the people in our sort of circle of friends have a tendency, I believe, to sort of say, well, writing to your MP is a pointless thing to do because he's not going to take any notice of it, and so why bother? We must bother because we must register with them our withholding our consent or a refusal of consent for their actions. They're telling us what they're doing because the consent is presumed, and we must educate ourselves, I believe, in what they're doing, and then we must act. And one of the things we must do is to tell them we do not agree with these policies, with these the way that the direction they're taking the country and whatnot. So we must tell them. It doesn't matter how we tell them, we must tell them.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with that, Mike. Exposure is part of it, but we need to take action. The UK column office here and the staff, we really still can't cope with the volume of calls, phone calls in particular, that we get every day, where people are telling us information, and we get a lot of very good information coming through, a lot of very interesting stuff coming through on farming at the moment. We are here, we can do so much. We're doing as much as we can at the moment. If you want to stop what's actually happening in the country, then it's got to be a broad movement of people actually speaking out, and as Mike says, withdrawing consent. But you've got to take action, the right action. It doesn't want to be violent. That is a big mistake. But if we have the electorate of this country saying, no, we're not putting up with this, we're going to be well on our way to winning. Okay, so thank you for that. And I just would remind people that it takes huge courage for individuals to come on air and actually talk about what they've discovered and what they've learnt. And Tim Rogers, I believe, requires congratulations for his courage in actually coming forward and talking about some very dark and serious issues, and what has been his reward for speaking out. Harassment and bullying from not only individuals in his local community, but more worryingly from people in the public sector, from local councils. What I will say on a happy note at the end of his talk this afternoon is the fact that there has been a very, very good response from South Wales Police. And we know that police officers who in the beginning were a bit sceptical about some of the things being talked about have now started to come back for more information. And of course, they are now having to face the fact that what we are putting forward is not what we say, it's what the government themselves are saying they're doing. So thank you very much for all the professionals, and particularly the police, who are now starting to pay attention to what's going on.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, we're on to the news.
Okay.
Presumably a lot of happy subjects actually to lift us up a bit, is it?
Well, I'd like to start with the first article,
which is food, which is a very important issue with you.
Certainly close to my heart, as you can probably see.
Okay.
Obviously, good healthy food is very good for an individual because it obviously keeps the body in a good shape, but also keeps the mind in a good shape. And I believe it keeps the two together, so that when you're dealing with big issues such as we are in the world, sort of
Difficult
politics
things,
and
yeah.
difficult things, it makes it a lot easier when you're healthy. When you're not healthy, obviously that's a problem. The food industry, or more in particular the organic industry, has come under attack the last couple of days from some mainstream media outlets. And the story I want to pick on is from The Telegraph. And it's written by Mr. Harry Wallop. And Mr. Harry Wallop is basically saying that organic food salads, their days are over. And what he's suggesting is that a new study has come out, and the study is saying that organic food doesn't have any greater nutritional value than non-organic food, which I would wholeheartedly agree with, because a carrot is a carrot. It doesn't matter whether it's grown in organic soil to an extent, or it doesn't matter whether it's grown in a non-organic soil. The nutritional value does vary ever so slightly. Organic is slightly better, but it's not a huge amount of difference. The real issue here is something that Mr. Wallop has completely ignored. The real issue is that it's not what's in the vegetable, it's what's on the vegetable that's the problem. So the nutritional value of the two carrots is going to be identical, but one is carrying herbicides, pesticides, and various other chemicals, sometimes hormonal chemicals that are there to make the fruit grow bigger. And that's before we even get into all the other sort of non-organic and non-natural ways that fruit and vegetables are brought to ripen. But the issue is that these pesticides and these herbicides do seem to have links towards illnesses. They are very dangerous to both humans and the environment, as is testified to the many waterways that have been affected both through fish life and microbial life that has been affected by seepage from pesticides coming from farmland. So that's one of the biggest issues. What I'd like to highlight is that Mr. Harry Wallop is basically using a study which was conducted by the Freeman Spogli Institute, the FSI. And the FSI basically run a study to see if there was a difference between organic and non-organic foods. And this is a really good example of why the public should look at what the Telegraph and the Mail and all other mainstream media outlets are doing, and then go to the sources to see what the sources are actually saying. And it's true that the study didn't really find that much difference between organic and non-organic. But what's really important is when we actually take a look at who is funding this study. And this study has basically been funded by BP, Cargill, which anybody who's in the farming industry will know that Cargill is a giant food producer, uses many non-organic methods to produce both food and meat, keeps vast farms for pigs where literally thousands and thousands of pigs are crammed into pens, which of course rely on antibiotics in order to make sure they don't die of diseases, which will then get passed through the food chain into the human supply. Goldman Sachs has also funded this study. Google has funded the study. But the one that really strikes me is that Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has also funded this study. And of course, Bill Gates was very controversial, I think it was a year ago or sometime last year, where he came out on a TED Talk and said that he believed that the world population needs to be reduced, and the way that he would do that would be through vaccinations. Obviously, this isn't dealing with vaccinations, this is dealing with organic and non-organic food, but as I've mentioned before, non-organic food does carry less health benefits than organic food. But Belinda, if we skip back to The Guardian on the 29th of September 2010, we also see that Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are heavily involved and heavily invested in Cargill and also Monsanto. And of course, if anybody's been watching the UK column news over the last sort of 6 to 8 months, you know that we've run many stories about Monsanto and how the chemicals that they use, as well as the pesticides and herbicides that they use, are linked towards real serious damaging effects in the ecology or in the environment, affecting no less than the bees and also other insects and other colonies. So what I'm trying to highlight here, and what I think is really important is obviously people's choice whether they eat organic or non-organic food. What I'm saying is, don't just believe the media. It's very easy. It's very simple. It only took an hour just to go and find out where the source came from, and then look at who's funding it. So that's really my kind of point on that.
But of course, we have got more and more people who are now speaking out about the food we eat and what we should be eating. And we've got a government that keeps saying that they're interested in our health and well-being. And if that's the case, surely we should be eating the right foods. I just come back to the Olympics, and I'm sorry. Well done, the medal winners. I'm always going to say that. Well done, the athletes. But I personally have a big problem with the Olympics, with the money that was spent, and we then see that the corporate sponsors come in like McDonald's, and for me, I just cannot see how anybody could put that on the table and actually say it is good food,
Indeed.
equating to organic grown and home cooked food. So is there a line? Do you think this is part of a government line, or is this just a bit of low scale media spin?
I'm not sure whether it's a government line, but I think it's certainly a major food producers line.
Right.
Companies like Cargill and and like I say, Monsanto. They have heavily vested interests in making sure that we do not eat organic food, and so it just seems to me to be very interesting that this is the story that's brought out, and it's basically using information which has been funded by people who have a vested interest.
Yeah.
So that's really where I think that the seriousness lies.
Yeah, and the other thing I think was just a final comment. We could say that just as Tim Rogers mentioned earlier on, when you start to get into where the money streams come from for all of these organisations that are supposedly researching or looking after our best interest or commenting, excuse me, very often we're coming back to these major funding banks and global corporations like Google.
Google, yeah.
So we say what actually are their best interests, them or our health.
Indeed.
I think I know who I'd trust.
Yeah, certainly.
Well,
certainly.
On the subject of food, it might be appropriate to jump to Italy.
Yes, we could do. Yep. Did you have a particular
Banking.
banking?
The subject
sorry.
was EU. That was a bit unkind of me, wasn't it?
Yeah, for a second then I was like, I couldn't quite see that, but yeah, I know what you're saying. At the moment, today, Mario Draghi has come out and allegedly he's going to be soon proposing a new system of bond marketing. If I can just quote from a report which came from The Guardian this morning, it says, according to Bloomberg, the ECB plans to sterilise its bond buying to removing it money from elsewhere in the Eurozone economy, such as by selling bonds or restricting the money supply. The ECB is likely to concentrate on buying short-term debt, bonds that mature within 3 years, in the hope that it will provide breathing space until longer-term measures are in place. Germany are a bit critical of this, and they've come out and said that Angela Merkel has misgivings and is unlikely to support this move, but the ECB do feel that this is the right move and the right way forward, as it seems to be propping up what I would imagine is an already spent system, really. And before I just go to Mike for a comment, I just wanted to read the last section of this article, and it comes from a quote from Michael Dirks, who is the chief strategist at FX Pro, and he said, "If this Bloomberg story is accurate, then the ECB's approach to bond buying will be in stark contrast to that of other major central banks, such as the BOE and the Federal Reserve, which allow their asset purchase to filter through the financial system unsterilised. Worryingly, this whole process will further weaken the ECB's already damaged balance sheet," which is worrying for those people who are in the Eurozone, because they're obviously facing some very, 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 very difficult times. Yeah. And these fiscal policies that are coming out from the central bank seem to be making things worse. I don't know whether that's deliberate or whether that's by accident.
Well, if we're right in the basic theme of this afternoon's programme, which is that we're watching a deliberately designed, deliberately engineered, orchestrated collapse within Britain and Europe, this would fit in. Yeah. Are you hovering for a comment there, Mike?
Well, Malcolm wanted me to say something on this, and the other news that came out today, of course, was that both the ECB and the Bank of England are keeping interest rates as they are. So this is, really what Draghi is proposing is an effort to keep the thing afloat a bit longer. They're talking about long-term solutions, but the long-term solutions that they're aiming for are full federal fiscal union and full federal political union. So those are the long-term measures that they're aiming for. So they're attempting to keep the euro system afloat long enough to achieve those goals. And in the meantime, people are suffering with lack of jobs, lack of good healthcare, lack of good food supply, and so on. So again, I just want to contrast the rather obtuse solutions of European political leadership and financial leadership with that of Russia, who is okay. They're using their military capability as the driver for it, but they are aiming to invest in high quality technological jobs with apprenticeships, with engineering degrees, and they're looking at a serious ramping up of their military capability. Now, we discussed on the other day on the show why that is, but the key point is that they're using physical production in a particular sector to drive the rest of the economy, and this is something that just isn't happening in the Western Hemisphere at all. And so they continue to play with their silly little monetarist solutions, which are no solution and really aren't providing any economic solution or any solution to solve the terrible conditions that people are starting to have to experience in Europe at the moment.
Yeah, but presumably the intention is not to solve the problems.
As Draghi said, the intention is to implement the long-term goals, which are fiscal and political union in Europe and the destruction of the nation state. And all they need to do, their aim is to keep the euro afloat long enough to get that into place, and that's a relatively medium to long term thing,
Yeah.
So yes.
Okay. All right. Well, we continue to watch that, but of course the UK column team are always going to be saying that people have got to be looking out for themselves. Our view is that before this situation gets better, it's going to get worse, and take care of yourselves and families and stock up, probably on that financial subject.
Absolutely. The next story I wanted to look at was a story from Press TV, and it's about London Met support staff to stage strike, and this is coming from London, where thousands of people are in support of the staff who wish to strike, and what they're striking against is that they don't like Boris Johnson's proposals to privatise parts of the Met, and the local media has reported on. The industrial action follows a warning by unions that stress their resolve to use every single element in our armoury to make sure that key areas such as training and forensics were not contracted out. And I don't know about yourself, but I think this is coming really off the back of the Olympics, where G4S really showed what a stark mess that the private company can make of our security and the logistics involved in that. And I think that because G4S is starting to get very heavily involved in police forces around the country, I think that some people are starting to have second thoughts about that, and certainly the Met would appear to be having second thoughts, or certainly members working within the Met seem to be having second thoughts about that. And I just wonder whether there maybe is some sort of mini revolt on the police constabulary's hands, based on the fact that they're in bed with G4S.
We could call it a revolt, or we could say that police are waking up. I personally believe, and I think it's supported by the contact and the information that we get here from policemen and women and retired police officers. I think they're beginning to wake up, that something's wrong. They're certainly beginning to ask the right questions. And of course, if we take it in a simplistic way, if the police allow their jobs to be privatised, ultimately they're going to be working for companies that can sack them at the drop of a hat, because there is no protection. But of course the police have got the solution to this whole thing in their hands, because if the police were to investigate the fraud and corruption, which is clearly there within Westminster, within the civil servants that are handing out these contracts, if the police would do their job and actually investigate the crime, which is there at the highest level in this country, then they would be producing evidence on a plate to support their case that they wouldn't want to get further into bed with company X, which has been shown to be fraudulent and corrupt. So if we're looking for solutions, we've talked some heavy stuff today, but if we're looking for solutions as to what can be done to stop this political rot at the moment, the police have got, it's on a plate. All they've got to do is investigate the crime, follow the money, and they will start to sort out what's happening in the police. And the other thing which I think we should stress, is of course much of the problem with the police has come through the Association of Chief Police Officers, which has been allowed to function as a private company, unaccountable to anybody. So it certainly seems to me that we've got senior police officers who have been in bed with the politicians in one way or another, and they are making this privatisation, this corporatist policy, which is now beginning to swallow the police. And if the police are waking up, that's got to be a good thing. Absolutely. Maybe you're right, maybe this is a revolt. I don't think it's quite got to a revolt, but somebody switched the light on.
Switching the light on. I totally agree with what you're saying. I mean, I think that the worry is that as more privatisation happens within the country, what concerns me is that private companies are very powerful in the sense that whilst we're all trading in debt, they have a lot more swaying power. I think I'm talking like major corporations now, not small businesses that only operate like in one country. I'm talking major international corporations. They have very, very big purchasing power. They already use security companies a lot, and I worry that what would happen would be that our police force, which has been it's been a fantastic police force and has been renowned around the world in the past. I'd be worried that would be slowly shifted away into, at the very best for them, I think some sort of desk job. At the very worst, it would completely disappear. And then we would have foreign, international, private security firms that would be on our streets, policing us and protecting organisations that we know very well are up to mischievousness.
Yeah. And of course, the other thing going on in Scotland at the moment, if any viewers are north of the border, please correct me on this, but I think I am correct in saying that at the moment we're seeing a massive attempt to amalgamate the police forces north of the border to create one single block of Scottish police. And I've been told by certain individuals on the ground that when they look at who is likely to lead this new single Scottish police force, they are looking straight at people who are obviously totally engaged with the political leadership. So who are the police serving? Are the police serving the general public, in this case north of the border, or are they serving the politicians? Mike?
Yeah, the point I would make on this is that as public services are privatised, we lose any form of democratic accountability that we may have, and in fact we end up with private lawmaking because in order to access a particular service we have to accept certain terms and conditions. So I just remind everybody that the relationship between the service provider, whether it's the police or hospital or whatever it is, and the member of the inhabitant of the community changes, and we find ourselves with privatized law as well as privatized services.
Yeah. Well, it's creeping privatisation, which is corporate fascist communitarian state coming into power here.
Well, essentially, just before we move on, really what it is, it's a transfer of wealth, isn't it? It's a transfer of wealth from the public, which we all share and which we all enjoy and we have the rights to a private organisation, or in worst case, a private individual who has complete control over that product or service. And as Mike rightly highlighted, we'll make the policy around that. And I'm thinking in my mind, I think we ran a story a few months back about hospitals and how it is hospital policy that they have no smoking on the grounds whatsoever. And yet the law states that we can smoke outside in the public. Not that I'm not a smoker, but I'd still fight for the liberties of smokers because I think it's important. Not indoors, but outdoors. And yet in hospitals, it's prohibited, but completely contrary to law. So I think we would see a lot more of that, and it would be quite worrying.
Well, on the subject of laws, our next topic of planning comes right in the bracket, I think, doesn't it?
Well slotted, yes. Actually, you've caught me on a list there because I wasn't quite prepared. Okay, so the BBC planning rules on extensions to be relaxed to boost economy, says a BBC story. And basically what this is about the government who have decided to relax the laws on planning permission. And this has come really off the back, I think, of a story which came out a few days ago whereby the government was proposing that they do away with affordable housing, which would then encourage more companies to take up building initiatives and to build more houses, even though it may not be necessarily affordable. Well, a new scheme has come out today, which basically has said that what the government will do is that they will underwrite these initiatives, so that if a construction company builds a housing block or builds like a close or whatever they want to build, and it doesn't sell, then the government will basically buy that off them, which of course at the end of the day is really, it's not the government buying it off them, it's us buying it off them with our money and our taxes. So I think that's really where the government is going, just really to spur out, I suppose what they're saying is to spark the economy. I know Mike has a slightly different opinion on that, and I'll bring him in a sec, but I just wanted to just rattle off a few of the quotes from the article. Basically what is going to happen is the rules on shops and offices expanding on developments, having to include affordable housing, will be relaxed, as we just discussed. And the local government association says that it's a myth that the planning system is stopping house building. And they say it released figures which show a backlog of 400,000 prospective homes which already have planning permission but have not yet been built for one reason or another. And it says these conclusively prove the planning system is not holding back development, although the government seems to think that it is. Prime Minister David Cameron and Deputy PM Nick Clegg have announced that 16,500 first-time buyers are to receive help getting on the housing ladder under an extension of the First Buy scheme. Under this would be homeowners without a deposit who are given equity loan of up to 20% of the purchase price. And I just say, well, that's great for the 16,500 first-time buyers that are going to get that help. Who they are, I don't know, but I'm sure there are much more than 16,500 people in this country who are looking to buy their first home. So I don't really think that this is going to help much at all.
Well, I think the agenda with this is it's to create disturbance in the countryside. We've got the situation, we've just dealt with food. So we've got the situation at the moment where UK farming desperately needs a major boost, so that farming is quite rightly a major industry in this country. And what could be more important than can we feed ourselves, particularly when we know we've got these world food shortages coming along. So is David Cameron, or David Cameron and Clegg, are they coming out to say that we're going to work on food production? No, what we're going to do is we're going to pour more concrete in the countryside. I personally believe this is to create friction in the countryside. Many years ago, I was a parish councillor, and one of the big issues was the Devon County Structure Plan, which was the plan for thousands of new houses to be built in Devon. And I witnessed firsthand how there was a plan for massive house building, but when you said, where are these people going to work? How are the roads going to cope with it? Where are the new rail lines? So the moment you started to talk about the public infrastructure to support the house building, there was a deathly silence. I think the plan is to build these homes which are not required in the first instance. I think we're going to see it used as an excuse to move people out of the cities and bring them into the countryside. And I'm going to say totally seriously that we have just discussed big society and politicians talking about a revolution being created in the countryside. I believe that this massive house building is to create massive trouble in the countryside. Mike?
That's more or less what I was going to say. That's I think it is absolutely correct, but I think there's also a bit of money shifting going on as well, because obviously if they move communities out from inner city areas tend to be higher value property, so they'll knock down the communities that existed in. I mean, this is similar to what happened in Devonport, as you know, that move everybody out, rebuild with more expensive accommodation, and then make a fortune on. It's the inner city development that's actually making the money. But in terms of the countryside greenbelt development, these houses, there's no requirement to provide so-called affordable homes anymore. So what are they going to do? They're going to throw up the cheapest possible rubbish that they can and sell it to the government. Effectively, I believe that's what's going to happen. They're going
But of course, the government's going to find. Sorry,
Yeah.
breaking in there. The government is going to find the money. The government hasn't got any money, or has it? The government's going to find the money for this. Perhaps if we need more money, we should have another Olympics, and we can magic up £9.2 billion to pay for the affordable homes. Or couldn't we put people in the Olympic Stadium anyway?
Couldn't we have used that money to have built the homes and then give all the young sort of like British people that need homes those homes for free, or maybe even at a reduced price? Or do you know what I'm saying?
Well,
couldn't we have used the money
I
better spent? I'm trying to say. I
think we're in danger of using common sense here, which is not a government policy. So we'll watch this. But isn't it interesting that Nick Clegg, that we don't see, we don't hear this man? What is Nick Clegg actually doing for Britain? What is he doing for this country? He's an internationalist. We've got massive problems. Where is British manufacturing? Where is British industry? Where is British farming and fishing? Those are industries that have effectively been destroyed under this European integration. Clegg, of course, is a total European Europhile. Yeah. This man is working for the EU, and at this stage, what can he talk about? House building. I think it's connected to the next topic.
It is connected.
Which is,
in fact, Mike is screaming.
Just there was a comment has come up on the chat box. This is Agenda 21.
Well, I couldn't agree more.
True.
We'll have to do a programme on Agenda 21 and include transition towns and all of this aspect. But okay, sorry, I didn't see the indication there. So here we are.
Okay, well, the next story is also another story from the Mail, and it's basically talking about immigration. And it's saying the last chance saloon on immigration control, landmark debate will discuss pressure caused by unprecedented levels. And really what it's talking about is the fact that the level of immigration really is becoming out of control, whether it's connected to the fact that we're building new homes in places where there are no infrastructure, no jobs, and there's not enough food in the country to support those homes. Whether these are all connected, I wouldn't like to say at this point. It does seem a little bit coincidental that these stories all come out at the same time, but nonetheless. Basically, the debate was called after more than 143,000 people signed a Downing Street e-petition last year, urging Mr Cameron to prevent the UK's population, currently 62.3 million, nearing 70 million. And I think that is a good example, if not a great example, but it's a good example of what we were talking about earlier, where people's power really is in your voice. You know, it's talking to our MPs. It's although I wouldn't advocate, relying solely on petitions, of course, because petitions again are talking, it's not doing. But nonetheless, it does put your voice to the people in power, and at least they know what you think. And whether this debate has been sparked by that or not, nonetheless, the author of the article has decided to say that it has, and I wouldn't like to disagree.
Well, the other thing with this subject is a lot of people are scared about talking about immigration. I don't find it a big problem, because if you go around the country, you talk to different groups, you can talk to people who are relatively newcomers into the country, whether they're from Eastern Europe or Africa. It doesn't matter where the people have come from. Common sense is telling them that we can't go on bringing more people into the country. But if you look for a different rationale as to why you'd want to bring more and more and more people in the country, when of course we can't provide the infrastructure to support the people or the jobs, the reason is that a massive influx of people creates friction and pressure. And that is the ultimate aim of the government at the moment, is this big brother agenda of packing in people, creating strife and division, so that ultimately you can break the system down. So I look at this, it cannot be any accident that the control of the nation's borders and immigration policy was put in the hands of the border agency. The initial, one of the key ladies that was brought in to run that border agency had got a track record of disaster with local authorities. She came into the border agency. There was then disaster in the border agency. We're awfully sorry, we don't know how many people have come into the country. What has happened to her? She's been promoted to the Treasury. Yep. This isn't an accident. So I think this is more, let's put more and more and more pressure into the country.
I just quickly add to what you just said. it becomes very noticeable. I was just, as you know, I've been recently doing some sort of groundwork and some research into like farming, and I come across the study to do with Margaret Beckett, you know, and the whole rural payment scheme, sort of failure to pay,
rural payment scheme,
failure to pay the 1.5 billion euros to farmers, which didn't lead to Margaret Beckett's sacking, and actually led to it didn't lead to, but she was already promoted by then, you know. And I just wonder how many times are the public and we are going to see that people make an absolutely cataclysmic failure in the job they're doing, whether it's banking, politics, or anything else, and yet they get rewarded with a big payout, a big bonus, or a promotion.
It's going to continue till we actually stand up and say something, and I hope this is what UK Column Live is doing, because we can talk about this in a way that the other mainstream media isn't. Mike, I'm watching the clock, so I'm going to give you a quick reply.
I'm just going to say she didn't fail. She did. She was given a task, and she succeeded in her task to destroy what she was meant to destroy. So she got a promotion. That's the reason.
Yeah.
I was being slightly more subtle than that, but well done.
Okay. All right.
And very quickly, I just wanted to put this in as a bit of evidence of what we're talking about. We're not just making this up. Basically, it's just come out as well saying that basically a third of some of the places in the UK don't have jobs, and these places will be the worst side being Liverpool, Newcastle, and the Central Valleys in Wales, and those that are still got the lowest unemployment would be East Cumbria, Buckinghamshire, and Oxfordshire. Just to highlight the fact that, again, we're building homes for people coming into the country, but yet we don't have jobs for them to do. We don't have an infrastructure to support them, and I just wanted to highlight that fact, basically.
Yeah, and we will continue to say that anybody that's living in Britain today needs to be on side and working together, because ultimately this regime, if it installs itself, is going to bite everybody. It doesn't matter what colour you are, where you've come from, how long you've been in the country. A dictatorship is a dictatorship. So I think whilst we can say that established communities in Britain may see some of this clearer or more clearly, it isn't actually the immigration that's the problem, it's the government that's the problem. Yeah. And these are not accidental decisions. No. It's...
I've kind of taken a little bit of time, so sorry about that. But
no, that's fine.
Which did you want to move on to?
Well, simply because I didn't want to miss out on this, really, which was the fact that it's finally being reported. I think this came from the Mirror, so I apologise to the Mirror that we've missed your logo off the top. But it's finally being reported that politicians are being booed at the Olympics, and this was George Osborne. Looking a little bit like Uriah Heep, I think, Mr. Humble, after experiencing the booing of a crowd of between 60 and 80,000. And it's interesting, isn't it, that when the public are really given an opportunity to judge these politicians, they know which ones are the bad people. And it's highly significant that the rest of the politicians have apparently bailed out of awarding more medals at the ceremonies because they can't face the embarrassment of being booed. No. Well, booing is one thing, but I think we could do something a little harder to politicians to make them really feel that we know what they're up to and we need to get rid of them, basically, in an appropriate manner.
In an appropriate manner, absolutely, and peaceful.
Yeah. So we've got five minutes to go. I'll just rattle through some of these. But recently, I think you reminded me, it was Asda yep. Bringing in Christmas early. We now have Tesco's, which has started to bring in Christmas 2 months before Halloween. And of course, the headline is that this infuriates shoppers. I don't believe this is anything to do with marketing. I don't think it's anything to do with profit for Tesco. I personally think that this is a cynical attack on Christianity, and the aim is to basically reduce Christmas to simply a corporate fest. And Tesco and the other mainstream supermarkets are now jumping on the bandwagon as rapidly as possible. What Mike's just said is, how do we deal with this? It would have to be that people start to refuse to shop at Tesco's, absolutely, or indeed Asda or any of the other supermarkets, because a drop in sales can work wonders, even with these major global corporations.
Yeah, it's not just very quickly. It really isn't good enough to complain about a company like Tesco and then continue to shop at it. In my opinion, that's my opinion. Obviously, it would be different from other people, but because nothing will change then, and we'll just carry on going on complaining about these corporations, but nothing will change because we're constantly funding these corporations. So, absolutely, I think choose with your feet.
Perhaps viewers and listeners might like to, or some of you might like to phone up Tesco's and actually register your unhappiness with what they're doing. It would be very interesting if 500,000 people were to phone. Child poverty, I've flagged this one up because it's quite interesting how all of a sudden we're now looking at Britain, we've got child poverty, we've got unemployment, we can't feed ourselves. I think that aside from the reality that there are families who can't feed themselves or their children, I accept that that's perfectly true. But I think what we're starting to get now is a media agenda which is designed to help the British look at themselves as though we are a third world nation. We can't do things anymore. We can't build ships. We can't build aircraft. We can't run factories. We have to endure an Olympics where medals are given by BMW instead of a British company. And I think what we're watching is blatant propaganda across the media in order to help us feel bad about ourselves. And of course, what do we do about that? The exact opposite. We need to start pumping out what's actually good. And of course, Britain as a nation has invented more things than I think most other countries combined nearly. I remember some years ago an exhibition in Holland on British inventions, and it was solely on things invented in Britain. So are we the problem or is it the government? I've got a slide later which may be that. This is another one along the same lines, that we have a judge, Peter Bowers, who let off a burglar, Richard Rochford, because he said it took a huge amount of courage to burgle somebody's house. And the judge didn't think that prison was a good place, so he let him go. Now, of course, this has fired up the general public, and basically, I think this is deliberate by the judge. This is stirring the pot. This is a ridiculous decision. He shouldn't be allowed to get away with it. But why has he done it? Why is it being reported? Because it's helping to destabilise what justice is about.
Absolutely.
I think we need to do justice to this, so we'll bring it in another day. But there's been an ongoing strike with South African miners, of which at least 34 people have been shot dead. The Independent has reported this. Well done, The Independent. But in general, it hasn't been covered in the mainstream media. This is a very serious event in South Africa. And I think UK Column has been asked if we look into it in more detail, which we will. So this is, with a few minutes on the clock, this was a picture, I think this is the Mail again, which is talking about photographs which have appeared from Cecil Beaton, and they're very emotive pictures of the Second World War and fighting men and women and the British public. I just wonder what those people would think that if they knew their efforts were to put this man, Mr. David Laws, back in post after he earned 16,000 from a city firm and he's fiddled his expenses. So what would they really say when they were fighting for Britain? And perhaps it's summed up by the fact that Sarkozy has recently been investigated by the press with his behavioural change agent working with Cameron. Meanwhile, Cameron is talking about fuzzy bear stories. I think this last slide exhibits the real problem in the country. I think that's about it for us today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for watching.
Goodbye.